Sherry, you've been telling me for weeks you couldn't hack it juggling between Helen and Lydia, and you wish you hadn't got involved with her again.
I know all this.
And I told you that something, if you remember my words, something ungoverned by you would happen to bring the situation to a head.
I know.
In the late 90s, films began to deviate from the classical high-concept films of the 80s into a much more self-conscious and complex post-classical form. Through this new narrative mode, a new language was formed, and more complex narratives became the norm for popular cinema. Sliding Doors, a film that on the surface may not appear complex,
So I did a test and it turns out that I'm pregnant.
but armed with a new post-classical vocabulary, contains a much richer matrix of elements than one would expect, forming several layers on which the average filmgoer can interpret. For this new language, familiar and classic tropes are dissected and reassembled in a triumphant homage to the history of any selected genres.
Lydia might be pregnant.
Sliding Doors acknowledges both its fictional status and its awareness of its lineage in film media history.
I must say, being with you makes the wait for the next episode of Seinfeld much easier to bear.
And it is this self-conscious parody using familiar conventions that forms the structure of the complex yet very comprehensible plot of Sliding Doors. The film follows two alternate realities: the rom-com, defined by the quippy, quirky love interest, and the melodrama, where Helen fails to develop as a character and instead gets dropped into more and more unfortunate circumstances. All of these genre conventions ultimately build to the fact that the unexpected Helen dies, and it is the sad, sorry, melodrama Helen that lives. This unconventional mismatch of familiar narratives allows for a shift beyond the classical narrative. Another twist is being led to believe James is married. While this is a large stray away from the Mr. Right character expected from a rom-com, the twist comes from the manipulation of the film's communicativeness. But despite manipulative twists, this film can be read in a deeper way yet. Starting with the ending, the melodrama Helen doesn't die. She tells Jerry to take a hike, and as she's leaving the hospital, she misses the first elevator. She waits for the next one, where she's met by James, who has just been visiting his mother. He then says,
Cheer up. You know what the Monty Python boys say?
Nobody expects a Spanish Inquisition.
Her reply is something Helen has unexplainably learnt from the alternate reality. This is similar to other Forking Path films like Run Lola Run, where the previous paths lead towards a final draft. But the two realities occur simultaneously, therefore calling for a different explanation.
Really weird. I knew
The fluidity of time and fluidity between each reality creates a subjective and hypermediated realism, exemplifying the non-linearity of the human thought process. As we are familiar with the question of what if, we bear witness to the realism of Helen questioning her own life. Lastly, the repetition of this scene suggests a very open ending, where Helen's realities could split yet again, infinitely, moving the thought of what if from the past into the future. So, familiar conventions and repeated motifs bundled into a rom-com melodrama work to achieve an intelligent film, but also work to achieve an accessibility from a complex film not often seen in Hollywood mainstream film prior to the late 90s.